Good evening. Today is Wednesday, May 4th, 2022. Brazil's most popular president returned from political exile with a promise to save the nation. The genre we assign to a life story depends a lot on how it ends. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's life has already completed several dramatic arcs. First, the hero's journey. A child born into poverty moves to the big city, rises to lead a labor union, and then becomes the most popular president in the history of modern Brazil. Then the triad, a celebrity statesman fingered in the staggering corruption scheme, sent to prison, and the first to watch from the sidelines while rivals dismantle his legacy. The ending don't seem to stick. Thought in April 2021, Brazil's Supreme Court annulled the corruption convictions that had excluded Lula, as he is universally known, from politics in 2018, saying the biased judge on his case has compromised his right to a fair trial. The bombshell decision set Brazil on the course of the showdown between the leftist Lula and the current far-right President Jair Bolsonaro in the October 2022 elections. Polls now put the challenger at 45% and the incumbent at 31%, with more centrist candidates of the put out of the running. For Lula, who is 76 and had been preparing for the quieter life away from the House of Power, this new twist in the history was a surprise, but he didn't hesitate to return for frontline politics. In truth, I never gave up, he rumbles in his famously gravelly voice, made hoarser by age. Politics lives in every cell of my body, because I have a cause, and in these 12 years since I left the office, I see that of the policies I created to benefit the poor have been destroyed. It's late March, 6 weeks before Lula launched his campaign, and he's sitting in the studio in São Paulo, headquarters of his worker party, chuckling and decrying that no one knows how to design a comfortable chair these days. He comes off as a jovial grandfather, but his allusion to current government, his back stiffens and the deeper, gruffer notes of his voice take over. Lula becomes the fiery young union leader he was in the 1970s, and they launched into a soapbox raised tirade. The dreaming of a Brazil that Lula pursued during his presidency from 2003 to 2010 lies in the tatters, he says. Through progressive social programs paid for by a boom in Brazilian products like steel, soy, and oil, Lula's government lifted millions out of poverty and transformed the life for the country's black majority and the indigenous minority. Bolsonaro has taken hammer to all that, scrapping policies that expanded the poor people's access to education, limited the policy violence against black communities, and protected indigenous lands and the Amazon rainforest. COVID-19 has killed at least 660,000 Brazilians. The toll, the second highest in the world, was likely worsened by Bolsonaro, who called the virus a little flu. The people who followed the isolation guidance, idiots, and they refused to get a vaccine himself and to buy doses for Brazilians when they first become available. At December 2020, national surveys showed more than 55% of Brazilians were living in food insecurity, up from 23% in 2013. Even Brazil's young democracy feels less than secure. Bolsonaro, a defender of the nation's 20th century military dictatorship, has caused mass rallies against judges who displeased him and attacked critical journalists. He has also spent months warning of electoral fraud in Brazil, in the echo of President Donald Trump's behavior before the 2020 US election. In April, the suggested elections could be suspended if something abnormal happens. If he loses, analysts warn a Brazil version of a January 6 riot is likely. If he wins, Brazil's institutions may not withstand another 4 years of his rule. Reading out of his political exile like a white knight, Lula claims that he can save Brazil from the nightmare, but it may no longer be the same country he once ruled. Its economy is reeling from the pandemic, with double-digit inflations and commodities boom on the horizon. A 6-year political crisis has bitterly divided society. Geopolitical rifts that Brazil once steadily have witnessed, and the West in the new hot and the cold war with Russia. Lula truly believes lightning will strike twice. In American football, there is a player as happy as ended up with the Brazilian model, he says, referring to Tom Brady and his wife Gisele Bündchen. He's been the best player in the world for a long time, but in each game, his fans demand that he play better than he did in the last one. For me, with the presidents, it's the same things. I am only running because I can do better than I did before. The crowd has been waiting for hours. Children sitting restlessly on the white plastic chairs, crammed together with their parents under marker to keep out the searing midday sun. Many wear red shirts with the logo of the homeless workers movement, which fight for public housing of the organized. This rally is a parking lot of the working class outskirts of São Paulo. It's been a long time. Lula finally begins over chants of his name. Dad, I've been missing the microphone. Neighborhoods like these are Lula's home turf. When he was 7 years old in 1952, his mother brought him and his 7 siblings from Brazil's desert-like northwest, traveling 2 weeks on the open truck bed to São Paulo. They lived in the back room of the bar, and Lula left school at 12 to help support them. But 17, he was making door handles at the factory, and on one night shift, he lost his left picking and a machine. At 53, Lula married a neighbor, Maria de Lourdes, but she died 2 years later from the hepatitis infection while 8 months pregnant with their first son, who also died. Victims. Lula would later say of the low quality health care of the Brazil's poor. A few years later, in 1975, he was elected the leader of the Steelworkers Union of São Bernardo do Campo, a São Paulo district, a few miles from the site of his rally. Many in Brazil know that story, which was immortalized in the syrup 2009 film Lula, Son of Brazil. Lula's trajectory has a very strong mythic quality for everyone who fights for social justice in Brazil, says Guilherme Boulos, 39, coordinator of the MTST, who is often considered Lula's political hero. But he himself is not a distant, ceremonial person. He still speaks the language of the people. Lula says the secret to his success lies in the ability to relate to working-class Brazilian, an unusual feat in a country where politicians are prone to price of milk gaffes. I feel proud to have proven that a mere work without a university diploma is more competent to govern this country than the elite of Brazil, he says, because the art of government is to use your heart, not only on your head. Bolsonaro, a former army captain devoted to the says what he really thinks. Political style would probably agree of the importance of connecting emotionally with voters, but Lula's populism conceals a shrewd pragmatism that allowed him to navigate Brazil's choppy political water. As President, Lula maintained the fiscal conservatism of his center-right predecessor Fernando Henrique Cardoso, sticking to Brazil agreements with the International Monetary Fund and the statifying investor. At the same time, his flagship Bolsa Família program boosted the income of poorer families, while other policies expanded the access to education and health care. If I can tell you that I have a daughter with a law degree, it's because of a program created by the Lula government, say Mel Nogueira, 39, at São Paulo rally. He represented hope itself. In 2009, 2 years before Lula left the office with an 83% approval rating, President Barack Obama called him the most popular politician on earth. Then, it all came crashing down. In 2014, Brazilian investigators uncovered the vast kickbacks for contract scam centered of the state oil giant Petrobras, with billions in public funds pilfered. The probe was deputy car wash. Lula was no longer in office, but opposition parties in the Congress took advantage of the anger at the scandal and the economic crisis in Brazil. To impeach his petit protégé, President Dilma Rousseff, she was not directly implicated in the car wash, but lawmakers voted her out on the pretext that she had funded the numbers to make public accounts looked better ahead of the election and replaced her with a right-wing interim president. 2 years later, prosecutors alleged that Lula was the graft scheme's mastermind. The formal charge was that he had received a beachfront apartment as a bribe from a construction company. Lula denied that he had ever owned the property, but in 2017, federal judge Sergio Moro sentenced him to nearly 10 years in prison. From behind bars the following years, Lula mounted a new campaign for October's presidential race. He was already in the polls when Brazil's top electoral court ruled that he could not be a candidate. Lula detected the logic of that. It made no sense to impeach Dilma. If 2 years later I would be president again, so they had to take me out of the game. Bolsonaro defeated Lula's PT replacement by 55.2% to 44.8%. Moro would serve as justice minister in Bolsonaro's government. For the Brazilian left, Rousseff's impeachment amounted to a coup, an attack not on corruption. Car was inflicted the politicians across the political spectrum, but on the social progress that Lula and Rousseff had tried to achieve. Yet some support remained unsure about what had taken place under Lula's watch. I wish the investigation had convinced me whether he was guilty or innocent. Left-wing filmmaker Petra Costa said in her 2019 documentary The Age of Democracy, but instead I was seeing prosecutors make a spectacle to present their case. Lula had spent 18 months in prison when the Supreme Court ruled in November 2019 that defendants can be jailed before exhausting their appeal options. In April 2022, the United Nations Human Rights Committee said Lula's trial had been biased and violated due process. It was a dark period in his life. Publication had taken once celebrated his accomplishment, were describing him as the criminal. His second wife of 43 years, Marisa Leticia, had died from a stroke during his prosecutions, and while he was in jail, his 7-year-old grandson Arthur died of meningitis. Lula deflected questions about his state of his mind during the time. He says he strayed from call of the Good Morning President for support who maintained a vigil outside the jail. He was prepared to leave prison without feeling any resentment, only remembering that it was a part of history. I cannot forget it, he said, but I can't put it on the table every day. I want to think about the future. For all his talk of the future, Lula's campaign has so far run on nostalgia. When he was president, his Facebook ads found out unemployment was lower, wages were higher, and the food was cheap. Lula has not really presented a plan for the future. For the time being, he is only pressing the idea that he was a better president than Bolsonaro, said Thomas Trauman, a political consultant and the former Brazilian communications secretary. Bolsonaro's pandemic mismanagement and attacks on the democratic institution have allowed Lula to command a broad unity coalition. Geraldo Alckmin, a center-right former São Paulo governor, who was Lula's rival in the 2006 election, will be his running mate. Other former critics and backing his campaign, including Felipe Neto, a popular YouTuber who was a fierce voice against the PT during the car wash probe. I am not a member of the PT, and I have had criticism about a lot of matters related to Lula, but those criticisms are in the political field, not about human rights, he says. I would like to oppose a legitimate leader. I can't stand doing to it against murderers any longer. With a country where per capita GPD has been cut almost in half since 2012-13, even elites, many of whom support Bolsonaro in 2018, have warned to the idea that Lula may better for business. I am the only candidate with whom people should not be concerned about economic policy, Lula says, because I've been a president twice already. We don't discuss economic policies before winning the elections. First, you have to win the elections. That will come as a surprise to many, since the economy has usually been at the center of Brazil's presidential campaign. But Lula doubled down, citing state from Brazil's 2000s a boom. You have to understand that instead of asking what I would do, just look at what I've done. If he wins, thus Lula would inherit a darker economic outlook than he did in 2003. It's hard to quantify how much of the economic success of Lula's first administration was due to incredible conditions that he was fortunate to have, says Gustavo Ribeiro, a political analyst. It's going to be a much more daunting task ahead of him. That is perhaps most evident is the issue of oil. During the PT rule, offshore discovery by Petrobras bolstered state budget and kept fuel prices low in Brazil. Today, the global oil price is surging, driving inflation in Brazil, while effort to fight the climate crisis had cast a shadow over the future of the oil sector, which makes up 11.5% of the Brazil's export. In Colombia, Gustavo Petro, the left-wing front-runner in the upcoming election, has pledged an immediate halt to oil exploration in his country, in line with the recommendation of the International Energy Agency. He expressed hope that Lula and other progressive allies would join him in an anti-oil bloc. Lula responds with disappoint environmentalists. Look, Petro has the right to propose whatever he wants, but in the case of Brazil, this is not for real, he says. In the case of the world, is not for real. Might he stop exploration for new oil deposits while extracting the oil Brazil has already located? No. As long as you don't have alternative energy, we will continue to use the energy that you have. Thus, Lula says his administration would scale up Brazil's production of the clean energy. He has also pledged to invest in the new oil refinery infrastructure in the effort to decouple Brazil's oil from the global market. He framed it as sovereignty issue. Think of our dear Germany. Angela Merkel decided to close out the nuclear power plants. She didn't count on the war in Ukraine, and today Europe depends on Russia for energy. Lula's views on foreign policy but put him against the prevailing wind today. As president, he refused to take a side in the West arguments with the rebels and prided himself on speaking with Venezuela's Hugo Chavez, on Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the same week, and George Bush and Barack Obama. He said he was very concerned when the US and many Latin American countries recognized Juan Guaido, Venezuela's center-left opposition leader, as president in 1219 in a bid to force Nicolas Maduro, Chavez's authoritarian successor, from power. Even today, after Venezuela's collapse into kleptocracy, Lula refused to call Maduro a dictator. Lula remained a die-hard believer that two elected heads of state sitting at the table, looking each other in the eye, can he show any differences? He claims that President Joe Biden and the European Union leaders failed to do that enough in the run-up to Russia's invasions of his neighbor in February. The United States has a lot of the political clout, and Biden could have avoided the war, not incited it. He says he could have participated more. Biden could have taken a plane to Moscow to talk to Putin. This is the kind of the attitude you expect from a leader. Most Western analysts argue that Vladimir Putin's invasion was fueled by an imperialist desire to seize the territory rather than any provocations from the Ukraine. But in Lula's view, even Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who faced the months-long build-up on the troops on his border before the outbreak of war in February, shares blame. I see the president of Ukraine speaking on the television, being applauded, getting a standing ovation by other European parliamentarians. He says, shaking his head angrily. This guy is responsible as Putin for the war, because in the war there is not just one person guilty. He argues that is a responsibility for the Western leaders to celebrate Zelensky rather than focusing on the closed-door negotiations. You are encouraging this guy, and then he thinking he is the cherry on your cake. We should be having a serious conversation, okay? You were a nice comedian, but let us not make war for you to show up on TV. The US and the European Union should have assured Putin that Ukraine would not join NATO. Lula said, drawing a comparison with the 1962 Cuban missiles crisis, when the US and the Russia agreed to remove missiles deployment from each other's backyards. Western sanctions on the region have unfairly impacted other regions' economies, he adds. War is not solution, he says, and now we are going to have to foot the bill because of the war on Ukraine, Argentina, Bolivia. We also have to pay. You are not punishing Putin. You are punishing many different countries. You are punishing mankind. The conflict underscores the need to renew global institutions. He said, "Today, United Nations doesn't represent anything anymore. Government don't take the United Nations serious today because they make decisions without respecting it," Lula said. "We need to create a new global governance. However difficult that may be in today's fractured world, many leaders and diplomats would welcome Lula's return. Over the past 4 years, Bolsonaro has burned countless bridges against China with racist jokes about COVID-19 and mocking European Union leaders. Brazil will again become a protagonist on the international stage," Lula pleads, "and we will prove that it's possible to have a better world." If Lula stands on Ukraine of his refusal to acknowledge any corruption-related mistakes, but his party says to mourn his support, say he is willing to involve where it matters. For example, Brazil's conversation on systemic racism had advanced since 2010, according to Douglas Belchior, an organizer for the National Black Coalition for Rights. Lula's anti-poverty and education access programs gave him a strong record on improving life for black and mixed-race Brazilians, who make up 60% of the population and 75% of the country's poorest. But today, black and indigenous Brazilians are calling for more targeted action to undo to Brazil's legacy of slavery and colonialism. Lula's next administration will need to put more emphasis on the anti-racism and correct some serious failing by past PT government on the policing. Belchior say, "Going back to the point immediately before Bolsonaro is not enough for us. We have to move forward from where the PT government stopped," he says. And Lula is listening to many black activists, intellectuals, and the politicians. He knows that the reconstruction of Brazil requires tackling racism. There also are signs of a movement on environmental issues. Thought Lula is less ambitious about phasing out fossil fuels. His administration was successful in curbing deforestation. Now he is settling the shifts Brazil needs to make on their food to fight climate change, arguably more important in the country where agriculture and the land use make up 61.5% of annual greenhouse gas emissions. I have improved how I speak. Now I am not only talking about ensuring that people can afford a barbecue, but also about vegetarian. He tweeted in February. So we can stimulate a healthier agriculture in our country. Brazilian media attribute some of the Lula's new talking points, which also includes an emphasis on gender equality and animal rights, to the influence of his fiancée Rosângela da Silva. No election in 2019, Lula announced his engagement to da Silva, a 55 years old sociologist and PT activist, and then planned to wed in May. He's hesitant to talk about her. She can speak for herself, but he has learned from her. He says, "When you lose your life, or your wife, you think, well, my life has no more meaning. Bam! Suddenly, this person appears who makes you feel like you want to live again. I am in love. I am in love as if I were 20 years old, as if you were my first girlfriend. Lula believes the marriage will shape the tone of his next political chapter. A guy as happy as I am doesn't have to rage. Let your opponent do what they want. He says. If I can, on the campaign, I will speak only about love. I don't think it's possible to be a good president if you only feel hate inside you. If all you want is revenge. No, the past is over. I will build a new Brazil.
Então, eu tenho muitas críticas ao comportamento do governo federal. Gostaria que ele estivesse correto. E tem duas coisas corretas a fazer. A primeira delas é convencer a sociedade ao isolamento e o presidente da República parar de falar asneira. A segunda, para que as pessoas fiquem em casa tranquilas, é preciso que o Estado dê às pessoas a condição de viver. Se for necessário, tem que fazer dinheiro novo. Mas eu acho que a sociedade brasileira, a mesma sociedade que elege um presidente tendo esperança que ele vai fazer alguma coisa de bom, essa mesma sociedade tem o direito de tirar esse presidente quando percebe que ele não está fazendo as coisas que prometeu fazer, que não é bom, e está fazendo um desastre. O Bolsonaro, nesse momento, é um desastre. É um desastre.
Lula is the future of Brazil. Lula is the best president of the history of Brazil. Viva Lula! Hoje e sempre. Viva Lula! Today e forever. Thank you very much for watching my new video. Subscribe on my channel. Subscribe, comments, give like. Okay? Thank you very much. Sharing is very important. Sharing this video. Thank you very much. And see you soon. Good night.